Naren, if I had a nickel for every Bachelor of Arts, Master, and PhD in applied physics and engineering that I've spoken to, I would have, oh God, what would I would have a nickel.
That's right.
Are you like this weird science unicorn in the business?
I mean, in the entertainment business, I think you're seeing a little bit more, people coming out of the hard sciences background these days than you used to. I think for the time when I started, I mean, a little bit of a unicorn in that sense. I hadn't met anybody with that kind of background. Usually people go the other way. Usually people try to start in the hard sciences and then they go, God, this is not for me. And then they go into liberal arts. I went the other direction.
From what I've stalked you online. And you got to change your profile pictures in a couple of places. We'll talk about that later.
Okay,
It's almost like you were like the reluctant scientist, but a reluctant scientist who went all the way through the, doctorate.
I don't know if I was reluctant. I mean, I loved science, all through my entire life. I mean, people would ask me why did I end up, being an engineer? And I'd go, well, because I love Star Trek so much. It was like, I wanted to be an engineer. I think what it was is for me is I think at heart, I'm a generalist. I just like lots of things, and that's sort of how I was all through school. And when you get to university, it becomes like, oh, you got to say you're doing this. And so I said, because my dad was a doctor, I said, oh, I'll be a pre-med, but I really was thinking about, medieval studies or French literature or classics and then I did that for a while. And then I said, there's no way I'm going to get a job doing any of these things. So I love science too. So I'll be an engineer. And it was like that kind of, that level of thought. And so I just ended up in that track. And it is probably, that's the analytical side of my brain is probably, primary. And so, I stayed in that path for quite some time. But, by the time I got into graduate school, and especially when I was working on my dissertation, I just gravitated back into the humanities, into things like history and politics and the things that I always really, literature, things I really loved. And I had been in a literary society since I was a freshman, a fraternity in a literary society, where we did creative writing, and would present those pieces to the members, and so that really became kind of the thing I loved. And there was one day I was in this lecture at it was a phenomenal course. It was the history of American foreign policy, taught by this great lecturer at Cornell named Walter Lefebvre, and he just given this amazing lecture on the early Republic and Aaron Burr and it was amazing. And I came out of it and I was walking back to my lab, which was sort of on the other side of campus. And I just looked at it and I was like, oh God, I can't be an engineer anymore. It was literally the moment where it was like, I just was like, oh God. And then it was, my parents are going to be so disappointed if I don't finish. So I'll just gut it out and finish. And that's kind of what it was.
You kind of are following to an extent in the footsteps, Michael Crichton, Isaac Asimov, right? These were all guys who were.
I'll take that company any day of the week, sure.
That's good. I actually, it's funny. I had started a science fiction magazine in my high school back in New York. And I must have been 76, 77, because yes, I am that damn old. Asimov famously was listed in the Manhattan phone book. So anybody could look him up. So I said, you know what? We have our inaugural issue of Zizijuk. That was the name of the magazine because some guy, Zizijuk was the last name in the Brooklyn phone book. So we used Zizijuk. That became the name of the magazine. But so I looked up Asimov and said, I called him up and got him on the phone and said, I'm a high school kid. I've got this science fiction magazine. Would you agree to be interviewed for our inaugural issue? And he agreed and said, you know what, I'm doing this lecture at NYU on a Saturday morning. Why don't you come and you can interview me before the lecture? So
that's awesome.
Right? It's amazing. So I go and I interview Asimov, and I don't remember. I must have. I'm sure if I asked my mom, because Jewish mom in Florida kept every scrap of paper I was ever associated with. I'm sure she's got 8 copies of Zizek somewhere in a drawer. But I don't remember much of the Asimov interview. But the question I do remember is I asked him, how much science does a writer need to know in order to write science fiction? And his answer was, you need to know either a lot or a little. I know a lot. Ray Bradbury knows a little.
Yeah.
And I thought that was such a great answer that there's that line when you're writing in science fiction where it's like, we'll just make crap up and it'll be fine, and we'll throw some unobtainium, use some weird made up words to explain it all. And then there's the other people who are like, no, you know what? The more actual science you can drag in, it opens you up to better storytelling.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, we would call that on Next Generation spray on science fiction. It's like where a lot of times Next Gen was not really a science fiction show. It had much more in common with like the Klingon stuff, for example, was really very Shakespearean, sort of the influence and operatic. It was, and then very occasionally it would be inherently a science fiction show, where like Yesterday's Enterprise was a time travel or a time paradox show, like an episode like that. But that's a very insightful thing to say about it, because you see it today. I mean, there's shows that are called science fiction that have no science in them at all, and then shows like The Expanse that depend on it to generate drama and environments, and it's a real distinction.
Hi, I'm Jeff Schechter, and this is the WritersRoom Pros Podcast. Make sure you subscribe, you ring that bell so you don't miss any conversations we have with writers, producers, directors, composers, actors, everybody involved in the business of storytelling. Also, make sure you follow us on Instagram at WritersRoom Pro. There was this book by the physicist Michio Kaku called, I think, Science of the Impossible. I think that's the title of the book. Where it's interesting, where he talks about like the 3 types of, here's stuff that, is at the edge of, we don't have this yet, but it's at the edge of our current technology,
Right.
Then here's the stuff that we might be able to do in the future. We just but we don't have the technology now. Right. And here's the stuff that's completely impossible that, we just, no matter what, we cannot travel faster than the speed of light. That is the physics of the science of the impossible. So he breaks it down into all that stuff. And what felt really interesting to me is that all the things that you had in The Expanse, nothing felt like it was that third category, right? Everything felt like it's in that, it's like just past our reach, or we don't have it now, but we will down the road.
Well, it required a lot of just determination to do things in a certain way, because when we started, I think Ty and Daniel were like, well, they're going to throw out the whole idea of ships that have to be under thrust to have weight, because otherwise we're going to have people floating around all the time. And I was like, well, why would we do that? It's like that. I'm like, there's gravity plating is bullshit. It's like, that doesn't work in this world. It's like, and so we said, no, we're not doing that. And I remember Mark and Hawk at one point, they were like, well, we got to communicate. Like, we got to have people talking to each other. And it's like, well, we can't. It's like, it's a hard limit is the speed of light. And it's like, but people don't know what's going on. It's like, and I was like, that's the point. That's the point. And we, and then I think they totally embraced it, because they realized they would bitch all about time about, the cell phone has ruined horror movies and thrillers. It's like, because you can be in communication, and they realize by having a hard limit to communication in terms of the speed of it actually opened up dramatic possibilities for us. Is that things could be happening over here that you weren't sure of over here, and they suddenly, oh my God, that's a different way to do an action scene. It's like when you are looking at events that you can't affect, where the outcome has already happened. It's not about changing the outcome. What it is about the suspense of not knowing what is going on now. And so and that allows you to do things in a different way. And so these were all of the ways that we would strive to maintain reality and I'm not going to say the laws of physics, but it's like honest fidelity to what the actual setting was. We always would talk about space as a character in the show, right? That means the hostile environment, the scope of it, the distance between things, the speeds at which things move, and seem not to move, even though they're moving really, really fast, but not fast relative to one another. It's like, these are all the things that give the show its signature.
Would it be right to say it's science forward? It's really story drama forward, but
it is, because it's not really, the scenes are constantly informed by the realities of space or the realities of physically moving in an accelerating ship. It's like all of that stuff is in the show. We don't dwell on it. It doesn't become like, a heart, like, it's not like, oh boy, I'm trying to think of an example. Look like an author I love, Kim Stanley Robinson, his Mars books, for example. He goes into incredible detail about the geology, about the science. It's like, that's not what we do in our show. We don't dwell on the science about it, but it absolutely informs the drama. And so we try to maintain those elements. Like, the only thing that we really fudge, I would say, consistently or try to hide is time, is like the time between things, like how long it takes to get from one place to another. But within the elements of the world that we've created, even those aren't fudged too much.
Yeah, I guess you kind of kept stuff kind of, I don't want to say local, when you're dealing with space travel, but it's like you also have like these multiple stories, so you're able to jump to different places, which kind of helps, I think, with the time issue. It
does. The guys who wrote the book, Ty Frank and Daniel Abraham, it's like if you ask them sort of like, what's the thing that makes it all work? Well, what they built for the show was a highly fuel efficient fusion drive. And what that allowed was travel at like 1/3 G thrust pretty much within the solar system. And so when you can do that, getting from Earth to Mars isn't that hard. It doesn't take that long. Getting to the outer planets becomes conceivable and feasible. And so once you just make one thing and you extrapolate from there, it changes a lot of things. And so that's the invention that makes that world run. And so, once that happens, then you just start extrapolating out.
I remember as a kid, going back to my science fiction nerd high school days, where I was a member of the science fiction book club.
Where is it? I'm looking at my bookshelf. I have my original copy of Dune that I bought with the science fiction book club. Four books for 10 cents or some shit like that.
Yeah, right. And it was every month. Like did you get 3 books every month, or you had? I don't
remember. What I remember is,
or you got 3 and you send the ones back you didn't want, or something.
Yeah,
I don't remember how it worked.
You didn't have to keep them, but but it was. But the thing I remember was how shitty they were. It's like the unmilled pages and terrible glue. So the books were
all coarse. I remember the coarse bindings.
Horrible. It felt like so cheaply printed. And so I found it kind of rummaging around like recently, and I said, that's got to go back on the bookshelf because I love that.
That's so funny. Yeah, the reason why I brought it up was because I read one of the books that I got was the author was E. Doc Smith.
Oh, of course,
Skylark. Yeah, Skylark of Space.
What were the first 4 I remember? I had like the Golden Age of Science Fiction. I had the Foundation trilogy. I had Dune.
That I got that.
Yeah. No, those are
Foundation trilogy. And then there was another one. It's like the greatest science fiction stories of all time. That was like an anthology.
Those were. It had like a collection. Like it had Nightfall was in it.
Yes, exactly. Nightfall.